Well, if you've been enjoying my Metal Gear videos, then I'm very grateful that you've stuck around and engaged with what I've been doing. And it was only a matter of time before the issue of the Metal Gear Solid movie came up. That's what we're going to talk about today. And this is going to be very off the cuff, and I'm just going to sort of get this off my chest. I don't want to make a negative video or a video of me moaning, but I also want to be honest. And this is something that's sort of going around at the moment with the resurgence of Metal Gear in this sort of, we talk about there being a Metal Gear Solid renaissance at the moment. And for good or ill, the Metal Gear Solid movie is a part of that. It will be a part of that, especially when you consider the news that we recently received from the producers of this film. Jordan Vogt-Roberts is still very much intending to make this film, and Oscar Isaacs is still very much attached to the character of Snake, and I definitely have feelings about that and opinions. And going further into that, let's address this saying that is prevalent nowadays, this idea of toxic fandom. And I think we've all heard that. Whether you agree with the legitimacy of that saying or not, you may believe, as I tend to, that it's more a case of passion and protectiveness than toxicity. And I'm not denying that those outlying elements do exist. There are some horrendous people in the world, and some of them are going to find themselves in various communities. But I would definitely say that some of my concerns, some of my worries would have me labelled as this toxic fanboy, this angry fanboy, and almost I could see myself being accused of gatekeeper behaviour for Metal Gear, and I don't think that's true of me for anything else. I am a massive fan of things like Star Wars, and I definitely have opinions on Star Wars, don't get me wrong, but I'm able to live with Star Wars in the state that it exists now. I'm not happy with all of it, but I'm able to live with it. I'm able to accept that I enjoy the old EU, the old material, and I can happily go back to the old material and take the things that I like from the new material. I'm a massive fan of G.I. Joe. When I was growing up, it was all about G.I. Joe. I had all the toys, and there were, you could go into Toys R Us, which doesn't exist anymore in the UK, in America, and you just had shelves and shelves of G.I. Joe stuff, and it was robust, it was healthy, and we don't really have that anymore. And I can live with that. You know, I'm fine with that. They've made some dodgy decisions with G.I. Joe. They've made a couple of dodgy movies, 3 dodgy movies in fact, and I have opinions on that, but I don't froth at the mouth over them. I can take the things I like from the movies. I liked Cobra Commander from the second movie, for example. I'm probably one of the only people in the world that liked Roadblock. I didn't mind The Rock being Roadblock. I loved Ray Park as Snake Eyes. I thought it was a stroke of genius to cast a stuntman as Snake Eyes, because he doesn't talk, and have him do all the performance through his physicality. But that's that. I'm a big fan of Batman. I know Batman's had its share of issues with the comics and the games, especially the news at the moment in Batman's treatment in the recent Suicide Squad game. People are foaming at the mouth over that, and I can see why. I can see why it doesn't bother me, because I know that Batman is always going to be there. It doesn't matter what a Suicide Squad game does to Batman, because Batman's never going away. It can have a bad moment in time, but nothing that a game can do will ever destroy Batman. It'll be there long after I'm dead. It'll be there long after my children are gone. And I think where I get passionate about my all-time favourite franchise, Metal Gear, is that I don't feel at this point in time that I could say the same about, for instance, Big Boss or Solid Snake. They don't have the impact, the cultural impact, or the fan base, and they're not as ingrained in society and in fandom in general as someone like Batman. So if we produce something that is classed as an absolute stinker, like a movie or a game, but specifically we're talking about the movie, if we create an absolute stinker, we could severely damage the brand. And that is what worries me on the one hand. Now, the other side of that is that the movie could absolutely blow Metal Gear up in a positive way. And it could bring this franchise to people that wouldn't necessarily otherwise see it. Maybe you are not interested in stealth games, but you will go to the cinema to see a cool action movie. I can't imagine that there are many people of a certain age that haven't jumped on the Metal Gear bandwagon that really engage with the franchise at the moment. If they're the kind of people that want to go and watch action films, that's a way for them in. It opens the door, and there is the possibility that we get people on board. There's also the merch that comes along with that, the tie-ins, the possibility for things like lunchboxes, t-shirts, action figures, memorabilia, all that kind of thing. And that is a positive. That would be amazing. And I really hope that what I get across to you guys, the people that watch these videos, I hope if you take nothing else away, you take away a sense that I want Metal Gear Solid to thrive. I want it to come back. I want it to be strong. And so let's talk about the movie with those things in mind. So we know that Jordan Vogt-Roberts, who did Kong Skull Island, and that's a film that I didn't mind it. I thought it was okay. It was entertaining. It did what it was supposed to do for me. It didn't blow me away, but I got a sense that he can make films. He can make a decent film, you know. So he's set to direct this, and there again we're going to approach from a balanced perspective. On the one hand, he hasn't done a lot. He's made, he's made some stuff that isn't terrible, but it's not mind-blowing. Kong Skull Island was fun. There were nods, if you look, to his love for Metal Gear, in that the boat was named Grey Fox, and I know that he himself, being a massive Metal Gear Solid fan, I know that his favourite character is Grey Fox, and that's enthusiastic as far as I'm concerned. That gets me sort of feeling quite positive that he does love the franchise so much, and it shows me that we're not going to get a situation where someone like Stephen Summers comes in and makes a G.I. Joe movie and knows absolutely nothing, and more importantly doesn't care about G.I. Joe, which is what happened with The Rise of Cobra. We're going to get someone that really deeply cares about Metal Gear Solid is going to come in and make the movie. But that can also be tricky. It doesn't necessarily mean that the people that love things the most are going to make the best thing or the healthiest thing. An argument could be made for Zack Snyder. We know he loves DC, and I enjoyed Zack Snyder's DC. I did. I enjoyed the Snyderverse, controversial as that may be, but I also understand that maybe his vision, his gritty, dark vision, may not have been the healthiest thing for DC, and we, it resulted in basically that universe collapsing. And I know there were other factors, and I don't want to talk about the Snyderverse. I don't know enough about it. I am aware that there were problems that there were personal problems, and there were all kinds of issues in the background. We're not here to talk about that, and there are people that can do that much better than I can. So getting back to Metal Gear, I think one of the biggest problems for me is the decision to have Oscar Isaac as Snake. If you're like me, you may feel like you know Snake. And when I say Snake, I am talking about Solid Snake and Big Boss. The protagonist, this overarching protagonist of Snake, which is essentially a personality insert for Hideo Kojima. You feel like you know the character of Snake. You feel like you know the character of Big Boss. And so you will have a very definite idea of who you think could play him. In my mind, I struggle to see Oscar Isaac as Snake. I don't know why. He's a good-looking white dude he's got the hair. He could easily look good in a bandana. He's done action, but you need a little bit more than that. He's got to be able to play all the clones. You need an actor that can play Solid Snake, Liquid Snake, potentially Solidus Snake if we get that far, and then Big Boss and the different variations of Big Boss throughout the years. A soldier that is a young soldier, a soldier that begins to become disillusioned, and then finally a warlord and a dictator, or at least someone who presents himself on the world stage as a warlord and a dictator. You've got to have someone that can fulfill all these elements. And I'm looking at Oscar Isaac, and I don't see it. Now, maybe some of you think it's a great choice, and I've seen some absolutely fantastic fan art where they've inserted Oscar Isaac into the role of Snake, giving him an eye patch, giving him a bandana. And I love all that. I love looking at that, and I invite that. I want to be on board with this, and maybe I will get on board with it as more things come out. At the moment, the casting of Oscar Isaac as Snake is a roadblock for me. So another thing that gets me worried is one of the central themes of Metal Gear is the idea of soldiers being used as tools of the government, and the way that idea is portrayed is with the idea of cloning. So they create clones that are slightly less than human. They view them as military equipment rather than actual people. And I'm a massive fan of the idea of cloning. I think as far as sci-fi goes, it's such an interesting concept. And I really would expect that as such a central theme. I would expect that from a Metal Gear film. Would they then have Oscar Isaac, present Liquid Snake as well? Would they have him do Solidus Snake? It's a question that needs answering. And being such a massive part of the games and such a incredible storytelling medium, I really would, for me, I would really want them to get that part of it right, because what I would not like to happen, and what I've seen suggested, is having different actors play the role of Liquid Snake, for example. So something I see a lot is, and I've never been able to get my head around it, is when you are scrolling through the forums or scrolling online and you see fan casts, and more often than not, they've got a different actor playing Liquid and Solid Snake. And I always found myself really triggered by that. I'd be shouting at the screen, don't you understand? You've got to get the same actor to play these roles. It's a clone. And it always seemed obvious to me. And I think what's got me worrying is that it happens now so often. People fan cast so often about having different actors playing the Les Enfants Terribles characters, that I worry that will translate to a studio. Will a studio cast someone else to play? If Oscar Isaac is playing Solid Snake, will they actually cast someone else to play Liquid? For example, something I see a lot online, and it got me thinking. Jordan Vogt Roberts has worked and had a great working relationship with Tom Hiddleston, and I see a lot online. People Photoshop Tom Hiddleston and Oscar Isaac together and have him playing Liquid Snake. And I understand if you had a very basic understanding of the game, if you'd only played the first hour of Metal Gear Solid, I could see how that's what you'd cast from. And but it's just, for me, it's not appropriate, and it won't work. If you're going to make a game that's true to the franchise, the issue that gets me really sort of worried, and that's the word I'll use, I'm not particularly angry or upset over it, I'm worried, is if they do go the direction of disregarding the franchise or changing something. So let me give you an example of where this may have happened before. If you remember the Ghost in the Shell movie, I know that's a controversial movie and a lot of people hate it and don't even acknowledge it as a part of the Ghost in the Shell franchise. That's what I'm talking about. You make mistakes and the franchise will disregard it. And, well, how healthy is Ghost in the Shell after that movie? I don't think it was massively damaged because it does have a huge sort of fan base, but it certainly wasn't moved forward by the movie. And there's elements in that film that that completely change the lore. They took a character, Hideo Kuze, which was the main antagonist from the second season of the standalone Complex series, and merged him because of his popularity, because everyone loved Hideo Kuze in that series. They merged him with the idea of the puppet master from the 1995 Ghost in the Shell film. And it just didn't work. It was clunky, it was strange, and it was jarring. My wife, for example, when we watched that film, she was like, "Who is this? What is he? Is this a bad guy or is it not?" Because you had you always had the ambiguity with Kuze, who was an antagonist, but I would never use the word villain. He would antagonized the Section 9. He wasn't a villain. He wasn't an evil character. In much the same way, the puppet master was it was ominous. It was quite scary, but not necessarily a villain. And merging those concepts, it made it really difficult to follow what was going on in that film. You never really knew where you were. You sort of didn't really understand the motivations of that character. And it was obvious that the writers had disregarded huge parts of the lore, and there were parts of the lore that the fan base were instantly going to pick up on. And if we do that with Metal Gear Solid, if we decide, well, we need a Liquid Snake, but we're not going to have him as a clone, that's huge. If they go that route, it completely changes the motivation of Solid Snake. And it completely changes a massive motivation for Big Boss, because Big Boss, the final straw that broke the camel's back for him leaving the Americans to go off and do his own thing, was the Les Enfants Terribles project. And I wonder what that could look like. The worst sin that they could commit would be to have Big Boss as just a cookie cutter villain and not have the cloning story arc. That would really upset. It would upset a lot of people. I worry about these things, and I think the likelihood of them happening, particularly in the way films are made today, the likelihood of them happening is quite high, I'm sorry to say. And I guess we've got to ask ourselves the question, as a fandom, can we let go of these things? And also we have to ask, where do we want to go with Metal Gear? What's my primary hopes for the franchise? Well, I want it to succeed. I want it to thrive and do well. I want a strong Metal Gear franchise. Maybe, as painful as it is, I will have to hold some of my fandom, and I'm doing air quotes here, but some of my toxic fandom, maybe I'll have to hold some of that in check. Maybe I will have to stall myself and let whatever happens happen. I have ideas for a film that would potentially mean that we've talked in the past about Konami remaking Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2. And I could see that being a film. They could make a two-part film, or even they could split it over a trilogy that tells the story of Outer Heaven and then Zanzibar Land. And if you take those two massive parts of Metal Gear and use those two games, maybe split over a trilogy of films, that could fill in the gap that has been left. Because remember, the only part of Metal Gear that's not been fully fleshed out is arguably the most important part, which is the Outer Heaven crisis and the Zanzibar land incident, which are two huge parts of the game and massive ramifications for the characters, but they've only been explored on first generation, the old 80s consoles. And most of the great story lines were not there. They were retconned in for Metal Gear Solid. Big Boss being Snake's father, the cloning issues, and all the character development surrounding Big Boss. That all came after those games. None of it was there to begin with. So if a remake of those games for some reason wasn't on the table, and I think it will. I think they will get remade. But if for some reason they didn't, we could transfer what would be remakes of the games and have it as a film trilogy. That's one idea. It's not my ideal situation, by the way. I want games, but it is something that I could live with. And you had the films then to slot in to that gap, that very obvious gap in the law. And I guess other than that, I can't really see how you would fit a story that spans 50 years almost. How are you going to fit that into one film? And now, unless you're a franchise like Dune or Star Wars or a Marvel franchise, it's very rare these days that they will say, go and make 3 films, go and make a trilogy. What will happen is you get one film, and that film is your test. If it bombs, you don't get to make any sequels. If it does well, then yes, you will get to make, they'll option you for more installments. But I don't see them just handing Jordan Vogt-Roberts the keys to the kingdom and saying, go and make 3 films, completely untested with this franchise that's never been in Hollywood. I don't see that happening. Again, that's a worry of mine. Hollywood's faith in the franchise. This franchise is practically, it's a non-entity in Hollywood. It's untested, it's untried, and they're not going to put money behind something that they isn't sure that they can milk for everything it's worth. That's what Hollywood does nowadays. So that's a worry in itself. I think the cliff notes of this video are that the Metal Gear Solid movie is a funny one for me. On the one hand, it could absolutely blow me out the water and be amazing, and even if it's not something that I like, I'd be delighted and I would be fine with it doing well. There are tons of films that I can't stand, but they do well and they create a healthy franchise. And a healthy franchise means that I can pick and choose the bits that I like. Whereas if you make something that completely bombs and destroys the franchise, puts the franchise back 10 years, then nothing happens with the franchise and I've got nothing to pick and choose from. So that's the quandary that I'm in with the film. It's always on my mind, really, and I'm always wondering what they're going to do. I don't know, guys. I can't visualize it. I don't see Oscar Isaacs really as a Snake or a Big Boss or a Liquid or a Solidus. I worry that they'll change huge things. I worry that they'll do things like merge characters. I also, I think Jordan Vogt-Roberts is he's so untested. I just think that they'll walk all over him. They'll change things. They won't allow him to do what he wants to do. I don't think he has the strength to fight for what he knows should be in a Metal Gear movie. But this is an ongoing story, and I guess I'm torn between my love of this franchise and my overprotectiveness of it. Maybe I do need to let things go and just see what happens. I don't know. But it's an ongoing story. It's evolving. It's evolving very slowly. The one bit of news we did get recently was that it is still on the cards, which I know a lot of us were thinking, is this still going to happen? We've seen concept art. There's some questionable concept art there. It's all very cool looking, but what's in it? You know, you have... I mean, it's just all over the place. The timeline's all over the place. You've got Old Snake fighting with a young face and the Old Snake uniform. You've got geckos fighting Big Boss when they didn't exist. They were they were in a different time period, and there's all kinds of sort of anomalies in there. I think they're literally just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, and I don't know how I feel about that. But then again, you know, that's different people have different creative processes. So for now, I guess that's it. I don't really have anything else to say. I could muse on this all day and we'd get nowhere. It's an ongoing story. I'm going to try and follow it as best I can, and I guess I'll have more thoughts when there's something to think about. So stay tuned, and this is something that we are going to follow, and we'll talk more when there is something. All right, guys, thanks for listening, and please like, comment, and more importantly, subscribe. There are so many people watching these videos that don't subscribe, and you'd really, really help me out if you did. So please consider giving me a subscribe there. That'd be hugely helpful. And yeah, we will get back to this. Okay, guys, thank you very much, and I will see you in the next one.